This is Wickett on Wisconsin. My name's Mike Wickett. After 10 years in Milwaukee talking sports, I took a bit of a break, but now I'm back and here to talk about the Packers, the Bucks, the Brewers, and more with you. And now inside the Koss Headphone Studios, this is Wickett on Wisconsin with me, Mike Wickett. Another episode of Wickett on Wisconsin. Thank you so much for checking us out. Coming up, we're going to get to the ridiculous first couple of days for Major League Baseball in their bubble-free attempt to crown a World Series champion. But before we do that, I want to bring in my special guest. And this is the first time on podcast I've gone outside of the United States, outside of North America, and to Australia. Joining me is a guy who covers the Milwaukee Bucks. You can hear his podcast, Locked On Bucks. Kane Pitman is my guest this week. Kane, appreciate the time so much this morning. Well, it's morning for you in Australia. What are you drinking right now? Because I just put my kids to bed, and I'm cracking a beer as we have this discussion.
Yeah, you've earned that one for sure. I'm drinking a coffee. I just rolled out of bed. This is the unfortunate timing of doing this kind of thing. Like I said, I could probably have a beer, but I got a bit of work to do. I'd probably be setting myself up for an unproductive day if I cracked a beer this early.
What would be your morning beer of choice if you did decide to have a beer?
It would have to be something pretty light. I see you're drinking a Miller Lite. It would be something like that. Something I can chuck down easily, I reckon.
Until I'm sponsored, I'm having what I buy. So,
well, hey, I like it.
For those that probably ask you this all the time, how does a guy from Australia get to follow and love the NBA to the point where he goes to Wisconsin, USA, and then eventually wind up back in Australia? I don't know your story because I think you got to Milwaukee right before or right after I left Milwaukee.
Yeah, so it's just the quick part of it, I guess. The last two seasons, this season was obviously cut short, unfortunately, but the last two seasons I've been based in Milwaukee, covering the Bucks on a daily basis. And I work as a freelancer, so I write for a bunch of different places, and basically any place as any freelancer does. Well, I'll write for whoever wants to take my work, right?
Yep.
So there's a couple of places here in Australia, and then obviously I have the podcast. But prior to that, I first started watching the NBA when I was probably 10 or 11 years old, and the first games I ever saw were the Bucks in the 2001 playoffs. So obviously at the time, it's a pretty damn exciting team. And Ray Allen was the guy that caught my eye. So I always loved Ray Allen. Unfortunately, it was probably a sign of things to come if you're going to invest any type of emotional interest in the Milwaukee Bucks when they traded him 2 years later. And then they really sucked for 15 years consecutively after that. So, but yeah, I stuck with them. Obviously, they've had a bit of an Australian connection as well. I love Andrew Bogut. I always thought he's been an underrated player, and unfortunately, obviously, bad luck with injuries, really.
Yeah.
But he had a pretty strong career. And then when I actually moved to Milwaukee, they had Matthew Dellavedova and Thon Maker as well. So from my prospects of getting work and pitching work and selling stories back home in Australia, it also made a lot of sense to move to Milwaukee because they had two Australians. Now, unfortunately, they were both traded within the first 4 months of me moving from Australia to Milwaukee. So, yeah, I mean, it all. I guess it was starting to work out, and I was starting to get a steady stream of work and feel pretty comfortable. And then, of course, the pandemic hit. So it's been quite the ride.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting story because I always wondered, were you sent over to cover Thon? Because I feel like you sort of your time in Wisconsin coincided with the Bucks drafting Thon, and then I thought, great, then he gets traded, and it's like, oh man, because I talked to some people about you, and it's like you have a very good standing in the Milwaukee media, and I'm like, you guys know who Kane is? You know who Kane is? And I think might have been Stephanie Sutton. Locally, who said, "No, Kane's a good guy. You'll enjoy talking to him." And I thought, all right, well, you're in Milwaukee for that amount of time. What took you back to Australia? Like, did you go just want to be home?
As in, like this year, like basically work, because I understood that once basketball finished, I was pretty confident that it was going to be an extended break for sports. Let's put it that way. So,
sure. Yeah.
I figured get home, I can still do some stuff back here. So we've had professional sports back up and running for a while here, 6 weeks, 7 weeks. So,
Stop gloating, Kane. You can quit gloating anytime now.
The other thing is, and I was talking to Matt Velasquez, who obviously covers the Bucks for the Journal Sentinel as well. Right now, even in the bubble, being in Australia is okay because I'm still jumping in on all the Zoom calls and talking to the players and coaches because no one's actually at the game. So it's such a weird situation.
I feel like, with the Zoom technology, whether it's Major League Baseball not letting anybody in and the bubble itself is literally not letting anybody in, I feel like the technology is actually going to be, I don't know, easier because you'll have guys, you may not be able to actually be at games or be at arenas. But you can sit on your couch and I'm in Des Moines, Iowa, and you're in Australia, and you can still be part of it. It's crazy. I mean, 10 years ago, you and I wouldn't have this conversation we're having right now.
No, absolutely. I mean, the downside from a work point of view, as you would know, is obviously you don't have any control over who you're talking to. You don't get the one-on-one. So getting content for guys like that, for guys like Matt that are writing daily for a newspaper, it can be pretty difficult because, after yesterday, the third scrimmage game against New Orleans, for instance, only one player available after the game, and it's Ersan Ilyasova. And, I mean, people want to hear Giannis, right? They want to hear Giannis. Yeah. And if we're at games, Giannis speaks after every single game, or, 95% of the games, win or loss, Giannis will speak after. So the fact that now Giannis can obviously say no, the team can not force him to talk and not say that you have to talk. There's not 30 media members there. There's probably some benefits for the players for sure, but it does make the job a little bit difficult for those guys.
Hey, look, I like Turkish Thunder as much as the next guy, but I really don't care what he has to say in 2020. You said you watched some of these exhibition games. Before we get to the exhibition games and what happens this week as they start the season in the bubble, I don't want to say that the COVID pandemic came at a good time, but the Bucks were playing like crap, or win-loss wise. They didn't look so great coming out or going into, I guess, when Rudy Gobert touched all the microphones. So did this break maybe come at a good time for Milwaukee?
Yeah, there's a bunch of guys that probably could have used a break, as well as Giannis. I mean, Giannis is the obvious one. That game against the Lakers, he went down with the knee injury, and no one really knew how much time he was going to miss. I think they were pretty optimistic, but at the same time, it's kind of weird to think about it now, but we were only 3 weeks away from the playoffs starting. So at the same time, even if he has a week off, there has to be some concern that is he going into the playoffs 100%? And it was just a scary fall. I think for anyone that cares about the Bucks, seeing Giannis go down in that way is like your absolute worst nightmare. There's a bunch of other guys on the team. We speak about Ersan, but Ersan, Brook Lopez, Chris Middleton, these guys that played in the World Cup last summer, they played a hell of a lot of basketball when you consider the fact that they had a long playoff run last season as well. So, yeah, I think there's a number of guys in the team that probably could have used a break. I'm not sure they would have wanted 4 months off in that situation, locked at home. I mean, let's not go too far, but certainly a little bit of a break might have been nice.
When you watch these exhibition games, and I have 3 babies, so my viewing has been sparing of the exhibition games online. Now, when the games start to count for real this Friday, obviously I just won't pay attention to my kids. But when you've been watching these games, these exhibition runs, did it take them a while to get back into looking like Bud's let it fly offense, or are they there yet? Where are they at right now from your assessment?
Yeah, I thought chemistry-wise they looked pretty good. It was actually kind of weird that their worst game by far was the third game, but I thought in the first 2 scrimmages, offensively the ball was moving around. They were getting their shots up. The guys they wanted to score and get the looks from 3, as you sort of pointed to, were all getting them. There wasn't too many turnovers. Everything looked pretty crisp. Now, they sort of said, well, we've still got plenty of work to do. Like, we're not at our best just yet. But, to my eye, it was probably exceeded where I thought they were going to be after so much time off. And they just haven't had time to do 5-on-5. I think they only had their first 5-on-5 practice a week before the first scrimmage. I mean, it's pretty crazy. You would never be in that situation in a normal season. So, yeah, I think they've looked pretty good. They also haven't played much. I mean, those first 2 scrimmages games were against San Antonio and Sacramento, so maybe that had a fair bit to do with it as well. The fact that the teams they played sucked. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's going to take them some time. The benefit the Bucks have is that these 8 regular season games ultimately don't mean a lot for them either. I mean, they're pretty well locked away in the number 1 seed, so they got a bit of time.
Did it scare anybody that Chris Middleton said he didn't pick up a basketball for 3 months?
I think it scared everyone, but I didn't believe him. I didn't believe him at all. When I heard him say that, I said, this is a guy that understands the NBA protocols and understands the rules and what the restrictions they had. And he's not going to say anything that's going to open up to any type of, I don't know, questions or what were you guys doing during this time? And he's not going to do that. So that's the easy answer.
You think he was coached up, or he and his guys said they said, listen, just tell him you weren't even playing basketball and don't give him anything to say. Were you violating this or violating that rule?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
And I might be wrong. Of course, I might be wrong. But when I heard him say that, straight away, I was like, "That's bullshit. That is not accurate." We'll see. I mean, if he comes out and doesn't make a shot for the whole playoffs, the problem with saying that it's a double-edged sword because now, as you know, Mike, not many people need much of an excuse to get on Chris Middleton. So if he starts missing some shots. If he starts missing some shots, they're going to be coming back to that regardless of whether it's true or not.
I mean, if there is – the pressure is always on Giannis. Like I saw a poll question, who's got more pressure on him this season and this postseason? Is it Giannis or Middleton? Well, it's always Giannis. He's the face. He's the franchise. He's the man. He is the – that Fiserv Forum was built because of him. I was there when they draped a big, giant picture of him next to a picture of Jabari Parker, but a big, giant picture of him down the side of a building like – Giannis is Milwaukee Bucks basketball for this generation, and there's always going to be the most pressure on him. But that being said, I mean, people are going to look at his Robin, his Batman, Chris Middleton, and say, yeah, you're 50, 40, 90 in the regular season, but you have to be that, or else this season's going to end like last season did.
Yeah, it's scary to think the standard that he set during the regular season, because when you look at what Chris Middleton was doing, and you can sit there and say, well, the Bucks need him to play in that level in the postseason, but you have to sit back and realize how many players actually did what he did in the regular season. And I think there's 4, and it's like Larry Bird, Dirk, Steph Curry, and Kevin Durant. So
step your game up, Chris. Let's go.
Right. I mean, so that's what I always. Yes, if he plays to that level, the Bucks are probably winning a title. Like, there's no question. But in the postseason, it's going to be really difficult to do, particularly after 4 months off. But we know he's going to be held to those standards. There is a fair bit of pressure on him. There's no doubt about that.
And I feel like the question is actually really easy. What do the Bucks have to do, based on what last year was to win a title this year? It's I know it kills podcasts like this and sports talk radio to say somebody else has to show up, because nobody showed up consistently when Toronto decided they were going to build the wall and make Giannis irrelevant. Like, somebody else has to do something. It seems just that simple to me.
Yeah, I mean, the only way around that wall and spreading out those defenders is having other guys make some shots. I mean, we know that. Like you said, it's pretty damn simple. But the numbers tell you that during the regular season, the Bucks were 36% from 3 last year, or thereabouts. I think it was about 35.6. And then it gradually went down. They were 37% in the first round against Detroit when whatever. It was.
Yeah, it didn't matter.
It didn't matter. Boston, they were down to 33. And then by the time the Eastern Conference Finals came around, they only shot 31% in that series. And the only guys who could really make a shot were Chris Middleton, George Hill, and Malcolm Brogdon was okay. He was around average. He was around 37% from 3. So, yeah, you got to be able to hit threes. You got to be able to hit shots from the outside. If I look at the Bucks team and look at the personnel that's come in, I do like some of the additions. So Dante DiVincenzo obviously is a guy who was injured last year. So he comes in. He's been a key player. I really like Marvin Williams. I think he's going to be a vital player for this team defensively, but also he can shoot the 3. And Kyle Korver's the obvious one that can get you some threes as well. So 3-point shooting, you said it. I mean, they're going to have someone else that can hit some shots. You got to ease some of that pressure somehow on Giannis.
I don't know where Korver's stats are at as the season was halted, but I do know that he was bad out of the gate. And then December he got better. In January he got better. And then in February he got pretty dang good. I don't know what it was at in March when everything got shut down, but it was like progressively the old man was finding his stroke.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, he spoke at the start of the season about having to get used to the players on this roster. And it sounds weird for a guy that's been around in the league so long. But particularly when it comes to Giannis, he's such a unique player. Just different passing angles, different passing velocities. There's not many guys that pass the ball like he does at that size. There just isn't. So Korver sort of said, yeah, it took me a little bit of time to get used to playing with him. But the last game before the season went down, funnily enough, in Denver, they lost. No one played. None of the starters played in this game. But it was Korver's best game. I think he hit 5 or 6 threes. He had 20 points. And he was starting to look pretty good after missing a period of time with a back injury. So yeah, there's lots of questions about what he can do defensively. But for a 5-minute burst where he gets you 3 threes, it can be pretty valuable in a playoff game.
How'd Brook Lopez look? Was Splash Mountain back in the exhibition games?
Yeah, he looked great. He was probably the brightest point of the scrimmage games because ultimately all you care about is staying healthy, right? I mean, it's like, what are we trying to get out of this? Like, Giannis is going to dunk on everyone, and he did. He scored, even in yesterday's game to the Pelicans, they lose, but he had 30 points in 23 minutes, and it's like, okay, well, as long as you're healthy, I don't really care. But Brook Lopez shot the 3 pretty well. He was working in the paint as well. We saw a bit more of that this year. We know he can do that. Bud went to that a little bit more. So Lopez, he's going to be a key player. I mean, he struggled with the 3 all season and around 29%, I think, which is well down on what he shot for the last sort of 3 or 4 years since he started shooting from out there. So he's looked better. He's looked pretty good.
When the rules came out about the bubble, did you think this was going to be a success? I mean, we don't know if it's going to be. We know what's happening in baseball with the Miami Marlins and 15 players, and they're not playing games for a couple of days now. But do you think this bubble is going to be a success?
I think so, but
there's already been 100 snitch line calls. I mean, guys are having Instagram models brought in, and I think this is going to be a disaster, Kane.
I don't think so. I mean, I've just speaking to some people that are in there. It seems like everything is pretty serious and pretty hardcore security wise. I mean, could someone do something that could jeopardize it? For sure. I think the thing that you're really looking forward to is that a bunch of teams that have literally nothing to play for only have a few more weeks and then they're gone. And I think that they've always been the danger teams to me, the ones that are down there. But why are they really down there? If I'm playing for the Washington Wizards, or
the Suns, what are they doing there? What are the Suns and Wizards really doing there?
I'm like, am I going to sit here and take this 100% serious? I mean, yes, if you're a decent human, but if you're not, and you're like, well, these games don't really matter for me anyway, are you more likely to break the rules? Probably. But are you going to see someone on the Milwaukee Bucks break the rules? Hell no, they're not. For starters, they're all dads. They're all mature adults. The Bucks aren't out here breaking any rules. I would be stunned if a Milwaukee player got any type of violation. But I think the one thing I said to you on Twitter the other day, I'm not 100% sure whether it's going to work, but what I do know is having no bubble is not going to work.
No, I would agree with that. I mean, I think the NFL, is looking at this like, oh man, because the NFL, I mean, you're talking about 80-man rosters and 120 guys on each sideline. And if Major League Baseball and their rules and how little contact players have with each other, if Major League Baseball can't pull this off, the NFL is going to have 4 bubbles. I feel like you would have to have at least 4 bubbles, maybe 8 bubbles to try to pull this off. Or you just say, we're going to live with it. If guys get it, they quarantine. If more guys get it, you keep quarantining. It just feels like unless you're putting guys in a bubble and shutting everything down for 2 weeks and then starting your league or whatever, like the NBA, I can't see other leagues pulling this. Like Major League Baseball and the NFL are the ones that are going to just not happen.
I mean, it's a time frame thing because, I mean, I was basically exactly what you said, but I'm an A's fan. So I was talking to A's pitcher, reliever or closer, I should say, Liam Hendricks last week. He's Australian actually. So that's why I was talking to him. But he said to me that, you're going to be trust all these people, like hundreds and hundreds of people. If there's no bubble, you have to trust that they're going to do the right thing. And they're just not. You're not going to be able to trust the hundreds of people to go on the road, be able to sit and not go sit at a bar or not go to a restaurant. And the other thing is, You don't actually have to be doing something wrong to catch the virus. I think that's the important thing. You don't have to be doing something irresponsible to get this thing.
Are employees of the hospital, are employees of the hotel inside the bubble or the bar or the restaurant, they can still leave, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not 100% sure what the the rules are there in terms of people coming in and out. That was certainly a concern before this whole thing started. There was no doubt about that. I think for me, because I'm not an expert, but I was trying to speak to as many people as I could that understood the situation better than I did and understand the virus better than I did, or better than I do. And for the most part, everyone sort of said to me, listen, this thing can work if they get through the first 3 weeks without an outbreak, because once they're in there, we believe that they're going to be okay. Because even the people that are working in there, maybe the testing isn't the same and they're not under the same protocols, but they're not in contact with the players at all. It's not like people are sitting at a restaurant serving people and breathing in their face and that sort of stuff. So the point that was always made to me is if you can get through the first 3 weeks without having positive tests, then you give yourself a real chance. And clearly they've done that to this point.
Is that the first 3 weeks of when they first got down there, or the first 3 weeks of getting things rolling, as in scrimmages and games?
Just from when they got down there. So we saw, the big issue I had was teams, and I know they had to do this somehow, like they had to organize getting back into their own markets in some way. But my concern was, why are we bringing all these players from all over the country to their own markets and then letting them work out and practice? And they were doing individual workouts. It's not like they were all over each other, but we saw breakouts, including with the Bucks, and they had to close the facility. And then ultimately, Eric Bledsoe and Pat Connaughton both tested positive. And my question for that was, why aren't we just getting these guys to a home market? And I know it's difficult and there's a lot involved in doing this, but if you want to bring them to the home market, quarantine them prior to any contact, get them down to the bubble, make sure everyone's negative before you're doing any type of practice, because really the practices that they had in their own markets were kind of pointless. It was just like, let's show up to the facility, guys. Let's get some shots up individually. You can get a lot out of that. And it was all about getting the guys into the bubble negative. Ultimately, I think their quarantine seems to have worked.
Are Pat and Eric in the bubble right now?
They are. So they're both, and they've both got through the initial quarantine. So they've had the multiple negative tests in a row. So
gotcha.
I guess they're not far away from playing.
Who's the team that can beat Milwaukee in the East? Are there a number of teams? Is Toronto one of those teams? Who do you see being a real roadblock to the finals for this team in the East?
Now, can they lose to a team? Yes. Do I think
so your answer is nobody. You got this team. You've already redlined them all the way into the finals.
Well, there's a couple of teams. I think there's two very distinct tiers, and the Bucks are the number one tier, and it's not that close. And then there's a bunch of teams that, if they lost to them, I wouldn't be stunned. But do I expect it? No. And that's obviously Boston. Philadelphia is probably the other one, and Toronto. I don't think Miami. I don't have Miami on that tier, and certainly I don't have Indiana. But Boston are dangerous because they've got a bunch of guys that can score 30 points in a game, which on any given night, if you have multiple players that can do that, they can beat you. So whether it's Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Kemba Walker's got some injury concerns, but Gordon Hayward's another one. And Philadelphia, we know, defensively, they can lock you down. We saw that on Christmas Day. Now, they still needed...
They shot like 80% from three on Christmas Day.
Right. So that's always the disclaimer when we talk about Christmas Day. What happened on the other end? Defensively, They were amazing. They were amazing defensively. There's no doubt about that. And it was frustrating to watch from a Bucks perspective. But yeah, they also didn't miss. So it was the perfect storm. But yeah, Boston, Philadelphia, and Toronto. It's mostly coaching with Toronto. Nick Nurse is just a genius defensively. So that's the kind of scary thing across the season.
Is Drake allowed in the bubble? Do we know if he is down in Orlando?
I hope not. Last year I was it was actually, it's so funny, but being in that arena as well, I was fortunate enough to travel to the games in Toronto, which didn't end well for the Bucks. But Drake was he was such a distraction that I found myself watching him for significant portions of the game because he was just up. He was just doing stuff. He was just being annoying. Like it was hard not to look at him and just be pissed off. Like he was just there the whole time. And if I was a player, like it had nothing to do with me. Like it shouldn't have been pissing me off, but he was just really annoying. And if I was a player, that would have been hard to push out of your mind. They say all the right answers, Mike. They say that it didn't bother me, but geez, if I was out there, it would have been really distracting.
Well, I don't think he's going to be let into the bubble. I think it would be hilarious if there's no fans and then just Drake. Just Drake. He's the only guy there.
Well, they did say that they're letting in some DJs. I'll tell you what, I'm calling conspiracy theory. I'm calling the whole NBA rigged if Drake ends up being one of these performers that gets into the bubble.
Good Lord. In the West, is it just the two LA teams? Because there's a ton of talent in the West, but does it just come down to the Clippers and the Lakers?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's potential for some fun series, and I've seen, as is always.
And by the way, don't be jealous here, Kane. All right.
Yeah. Well, you're really tempting me now.
It's like really 8 a.m. where you are right now, and it's about 6:30 p.m. here. So this is where we're at right now.
I've been to a few Packers games in my time where where you jump on the bus and half the people are sleeping and I'm cracking beers at 6 a.m. I've done a couple opening day tailgates for the Brewers as well. So listen, it would not even be close to the earliest beer I've had in my life. So I shouldn't get too tempted because I will go and crack on. But I think the closer we get to the playoffs, there's always the excitement people have for an upset. So you might hear, if New Orleans gets Zion back, they could give the Lakers a run for their money. Portland with Damian Lillard, they could give the Lakers. I mean, come on, let's not be ridiculous. I think there'll be some fun series. As you said, there's some pretty dangerous teams when you think of Dallas in the 6 or 7 seed. Houston, obviously, pretty talented, but ultimately, I think the Lakers have LeBron and AD, and the Clippers are just super damn deep.
I'm scared of Kawhi. I literally am just. I think Bucks fans still have nightmares of Kawhi Leonard. I mean, there were some. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of talent. Siakam's a tremendous talent, and what's his nuts? The gunner that had the career series. Yeah, Van Vliet. I mean, there were guys that had nice series. Kawhi Leonard might be the best two-way player in the NBA right now for what he can do defensively, locking you down. And God, I'll admit to you, Kane, when he was with San Antonio, I always thought he's a bit part. He's not the man. I mean, I thought he was a really good player, but God bless, he goes to Toronto and turned everything around in a year.
Yeah, I mean, even when he won that Finals MVP, it was easy to feel that way because he was playing next to Tim Duncan and Tony Parker and Manu. So it's just
he's a big four,
Right. And but no, he's really taken over. It's interesting the season he had last year in Toronto because I think for the most part, I always get this question asked to me, or I always see Bucks fans ask this question on Twitter, and it's, would you prefer to have Giannis? And let me ask you this: would you prefer to have Giannis for the next 10 years and not win a championship, but always be in the playoffs, always be making long runs? Or would you want to win the championship? Let's not say this year because this year's kind of weird. I wouldn't feel the same. But let's say next year and pretend and hope that it's a normal year. You can have fans at Fiserv, have a parade, win that championship, but then he leaves.
Take the title. Take the championship. I think you'd want the championship. I think Toronto will always be able to say, we had a championship. And they haven't had one since the Blue Jays back in the 90s. I think Bucks fans would take the title. And, I mean, it's kind of like, you want one more for Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. But he's going to be gone in 2 years because of the draft pick in Jordan Love. Well, you still want that title so you can have it and Giannis can be your guy. And I think there's still a lot of Bucks fans that think Giannis is going to be gone anyway. That he'll sign a 4-year deal or whatever, and he'll wind up in LA or New York. At some point in his career, will he get sick of Milwaukee? I still feel like there are a lot of Bucks fans that fear that.
So, I mean, I think it's a no-brainer. You take the title because let's think about the play. I mean, he's already, basically, I mean, he's going to win his second MVP. So arguably, you can say he's the best player the franchise has had and put him above Kareem if you want to go down that path. I mean, obviously.
That's a different podcast.
But listen, you can say it purely for what he did in Milwaukee. He might be the best player the franchise has ever had. So, but regardless of that, they won the title in 1971. So we're talking 50 years since they've had a player of this caliber. Now, you can tell me that it would be fun to have a decade of making the postseason, sure. But in the end, you're also going to become very pissed off that they can't get over the hump. There's going to be the endless speculation and rumors about him leaving because the Bucks can't get over the hump. You're going to spend the back half of this decade just angry the whole time because you can't get this championship. You take the championship every time, and if he leaves anyway, you're not going to be back in this position hunting for a title. So you take the title. That's easy for me.
Is there? I would definitely agree with you on that one. I just feel like you want a title, and I don't care if it's one for the next 30 years or one for the next 50 years. So it's just like what happened with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, but you want that championship so that way you can have pictures of you and your kid on Wisconsin Avenue. Right. Let me ask you this. How big is the asterisk if somebody's going to hoist the Larry O'Brien trophy? How big is the asterisk in the middle of that trophy?
Well, I've always had this theory when people talk about asterisks and it comes to sporting championships. There's only an asterisk if your team doesn't win. And I've always thought that. Because, listen, if the Bucks win the title, you're going to hear endless crap from Lakers fans, Clippers fans, every other team that it doesn't matter and it's not a title. If you're a Bucks fan, you don't care. You still sat there and watched the games. Will you have Fiserv Forum? No. We hope that, come November, and listen, I say this with not much confidence, but you hope by November you can have some sort of parade. I joked on Twitter, just put Giannis in the Pope Mobile and run him down the streets. You're going to get enough people out there. They won't be able to get anywhere near him. They won't be able to breathe.
Oh, the other way. Put him in a building and then have everybody walk by him like a mannequin. That way, everybody gets to see Giannis.
Listen, you can figure something out, but I can tell you that, as you know, from being in Milwaukee and the passion the fans have for sports and that sort of stuff, if the Bucks are making a deep playoff run this year, which we expect them to do, regardless of whether it's in Milwaukee or it's down in Disney, you're gonna see people getting pretty damn excited about it. So I don't pay any credit to the asterisk stuff.
Barring injury, what is your take on this team if they don't win a title?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to say without knowing the way it went down. You would not want, I tell you what, you would not want to see this team lose before reaching the finals again and shooting become an issue. And, Eric Bledsoe have playoff struggles and Brook Lopez become someone that can't hit a three, because then you've seen 2 years consecutively that they've gone out in the same way. And they certainly have invested both the money and years into this roster. The one thing I always said from the start, though, when people say if they don't win, Giannis is going to be annoyed and might leave. If you think that Giannis wasn't heavily involved in bringing all these players back, then, come on, let's get serious about this. Let's get real. So he was involved in all that stuff. He knew that they were going to sign and trade Malcolm Brogdon. He knew that they were maxing Chris Middleton and bringing these guys back and bringing George Hill here. He played a hand in bringing Wes Matthews and Kyle Korver. So let's not act like the Bucks just went off on their own and brought this roster back. Giannis wanted these guys.
And Middleton's the key. I mean, if he didn't want Middleton maxed out at $35 million a year, which the numbers are crazy now, so I stopped caring about NBA money, and it's strange to think that Chris Middleton is a $35 million a year guy. But if Giannis didn't want Middleton back, Middleton doesn't come back and sign that super max. He's gone. They trade him. They do whatever, and they try to find another number two.
No question. I mean, the only thing that I will say, and I think this makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of people would agree. If someone like Eric Bledsoe, for instance, and I feel bad. I'm kind of an Eric Bledsoe apologist because I do feel bad for how much he cops, and maybe it's warranted. Unfortunately, he has had some bad moments in the postseason the last 2 years, and he's a guy that needs to step up. But I do think if it was a disaster again and the Bucks fell short, then I think they're looking to move him on if possible. But
listen, if there's a way, Kane, that you can draw a stripe on the court and don't let Eric Bledsoe shoot from outside of that stripe, that would really help the Bucks, because that dude is so good at going and kicking. He's so thick. He's hard to knock down. I love that guy going to the rack, but when the worst thing is when he hits one early three, then it's just over. Then he's going to shoot the next 17 from outside, and he's not that good of a shooter. I love when he's a drive and kick guy, but I hate when he tries to be a 3-point shooter.
Yeah, they need to find a way. I don't know what it is with him, and he's always been a guy that, I mean, defensively he's so critical to everything they do, but on offense he does go through nights where, as you said, sometimes he's super aggressive, and he's such an efficient scorer in the restricted area as well. But then he has nights where he's like, I'm not going to attack tonight. I don't feel like doing this. And they just
it's frustrating.
They can't afford to have that because he's such a barometer for them. When he's playing well, they're almost unstoppable. I mean, I've said this. If Bledsoe's playing at, his regular season best, I mean, they're not getting beat. They're winning the title.
I probably agree with that. I think I do. And we always talk about Giannis and Middleton and Lopez and other guys. But if Eric Bledsoe is playing within himself and playing within the system and knowing his role, I probably agree with you. The Bucks aren't getting beat.
Yeah, no, I just, I mean, because, and I think part of that is because I think I know what I can expect from Giannis. I feel pretty confident I can know what to expect from Chris Middleton, even who, ultimately in the Eastern Conference Finals was pretty poor offensively, but he was also trying to defend Kawhi on the other end, and there wasn't much help there. But historically, he's been a damn good shooter in the postseason. So I think I know what I'm going to get from Chris. Am I 100% sure what I'm going to get from Bledsoe and Brook Lopez? Not really.
No.
And I think that, and that's the difference. If those guys are themselves, like I said, I mean, they're not losing. They're winning this thing.
Of the 8 games they'll play before the playoffs, how many are they going to win? Does it matter? They go 4-4. They go. Does it really? I haven't looked at the standings. Is anybody within striking distance?
No, I mean, Toronto are 6.5 games back. So yeah, I mean, the Bucks would have to go like 1-7, and the Raptors would have to win out for them to lose to the number 1 seed. So yeah, they're not going to lose the number 1 seed. I think it will mostly be just about getting these guys into shape. We spent so much time talking about Eric Bledsoe. Obviously, he hasn't played a game yet and was really in this sort of extended quarantine as he was tested positive for COVID. So getting a guy like him back in shape and integrated back into the team is going to be important. I think for the most part, we look at the first rounders, it should be pretty plain sailing as well. So 8 regular season games and 4 playoff games. It feels weird to say this as a Bucks fan, that you expect there's only going to be 4 games in the first round and they're actually going to win. But they should have 12. They should have 12 to 13 games here to get themselves in good shape.
Are they cutting down the nets? Are they winning the title in the bubble in Orlando, Kane? And I'm not. Listen, things will change. Things will happen. Guys will get hurt. Guys will come out cold. But right now, if you are going to draw in your winner, is it the Bucks?
Well, I'll say yes, just because I think that the dominance that we've seen through the regular season and all the stats point to the Bucks being the best team by a wide margin, particularly defensively. I look at teams like the Lakers. I don't like their outside shooting.
And they got 2 huge injuries. The Avery Bradley situation and Rondo. That's big on a bunch of levels. I mean, LeBron's going to run point in crunch time anyway, but still losing those guys, it's a big deal.
Yeah, no question. So I agree with what you said a while ago here on the pod, that the Clippers scare me more than the Lakers. But do I like LeBron going absolute beast mode on the Clippers and beating them in a series? Sure. And would I be scared of LeBron in the NBA Finals? Hell yeah. The guy's an absolute maniac. But I do think the Bucks system, I think their defense is set up to beat a team like the Lakers. So I would take the Bucks, yes. I feel okay about that. But I will say that there's never been a postseason ever that's had more variables than this one. I mean, literally anything could happen.
That's a great point, man. Hey, I'm going to leave you with that. I want to thank you so much for waking up early and enjoying watching me drink beer while we talk about Bucks basketball. Hopefully we can do it again. And as this bubble continues, hopefully everybody is safe. And maybe we talk about them again in the Eastern Conference Finals, something like that. How's that sound?
Hey, listen, all I'm doing is sitting around at home, watching sports, talking about sports, trying to chase some work. So I got plenty of time, man. This was this was fun.
Well, thanks. We'll do it again. You can check out Kane's podcast, Locked On Bucks. Don't miss it, because they talk more Bucks than I do, because I do this once a week. They do this a bunch of times. So, Kane, thank you so much for the time, man. You stay safe in Australia.
I will do my absolute best. Same to you.
Thanks to Kane Pitman for joining me. And what a fun dude to talk to. I got to have that guy on more often, especially if the Bucks go deep in this really strange playoff run that we're all getting excited for. And man, that guy, he's good. Locked On Bucks. Check out his podcast. It's really, really good. And it's so strange. When I was chatting with him, it was 8 in the morning, and it was 6:30 p.m. here in the Central Time Zone in America. But, technology is wild. It's really, really cool. So I'm glad he was able to come on and talk about the Bucks and the bubble. We'll have lots of Bucks talk here on Wickett on Wisconsin. And speaking of bubbles, I'm going to have to talk about the NFL at another time because I want to talk about Major League Baseball real quick here and what has happened over the first couple of days of the Major League Baseball 60-game season. Considering everything that has gone on, we finally actually have, something to watch on TV. And I'm going to start, first of all, with the good news. And watching the Brewers over the weekend, I know they lost 2 out of 3 to the Cubs, and I know they've split the first 2 at the Pirates as I record this, and what happened with Suter, it was unacceptable. And, we'll get to that. But, from the overall viewer aspect, just sitting back on my couch and watching on Fox Sports Wisconsin and watching the Brewers and watching the first couple of games, first of all, it's great just to have baseball back. I know that's cliche and everybody's going to say that, but it's great just to have baseball back. I think that we can all kind of agree that it's been great and that's fun. But the viewing aspect with the crowd noise and everything, I really didn't mind there being fake crowd noise. Like, I thought it was actually really, really well done for the games in Chicago. And on the Saturday game, they did the CGI fans, and the CGI fans were kind of weird, and they were very selective when they used them. They weren't there at all times. They were there for overhead shots and some shots of the crowd, if you want to say there were shots of the crowd. But I really feel like, and of course I want there to be fans in the seats. That's something that I think is, a big part of the game, and one day hopefully we'll be able to get back to fans being in stands at baseball games. But I really feel like they did a nice job of making it seem somewhat normal. And I felt that way going into the regular season after watching some of the scrimmages and what the Fox Sports Wisconsin and Brewers.com crew were doing. But I thought it was pretty neat. Like, I would give it 2 thumbs up. Like, I didn't miss the fans. Like, I didn't sit there watching thinking, God, this just stinks, because they made you feel like you were watching a ball game. I thought, good job. And they did that again in Pittsburgh, and I think it's, I think it's cool. I think they could do without the CGI fans, because the first problem I have with the CGI fans was they had a bunch of fans standing. And you don't stand at baseball games. Heck, I've been to a lot of games at Wrigley Field where the fans are incapable of standing. And Miller Park, too. So I don't need the CGI fans. I don't think that's going to be something that fans are clamoring for. At least I wasn't clamoring for it. I think it made it feel a little video gamey. MLB The Show, kind of. And they did a nice job of sprinkling Brewers fans in with the Cubs fans, sure. But I don't know. I can take it or leave it. It's not going to make or break my watching experience like having the crowd noise is. I think that's really, really a cool aspect. I think they did a really good job with it. In terms of the team, normally when I was on the air in Milwaukee and talking about games in April and the first part of a baseball season, if the team was to lose 2 out of 3 over the first weekend, which happened, I'm sure of it, you could always sit there and say, well, it's early. It's April. And it was always early. To me, it's always early until Memorial Day in a regular season. But I don't think you can play the it's early card too much. I'm going to pull up some stats here in just a sec. But I don't think you can play the it's early card very long, here in this 60-game sprint. You know what I mean? Then, when I thought they were going to drop the first game against the Pirates, and they came out of that with a win, I thought, uh-oh, this is going to be real bad. Because normally 1-3 in that first week, yeah, it's okay. It happens, right? It's not a big deal. But 1-3 versus 2-2, I was talking to somebody on Twitter about this, and 1-3 versus 2-2 in this setting, in this situation, feels a lot heavier, doesn't it? It just feels a lot bigger and a lot scarier than anything else. And so when they grabbed victory from the jaws of defeat in the first game against the Pirates, not the second game, we'll get to that, I thought, great. I feel a lot better about this. Guys that are standing out. You had Smoke hit a home run early. Arcia had a bunch of hits early. And then there's the other side. There's Christian Yelich, who people are very scared about right now. He is, let me make sure I get the stats right, 1 for 22 Now, the one hit is a home run. He hit a bomb in Chicago, but he's 1 for 22, and people are already freaking out about Christian Yelich. We knew this was going to happen. We knew guys were going to start off with either really, really hot starts to the season or really, really cold starts to the season, and you weren't expecting Christian Yelich to start 1 for 22. You weren't expecting that. You weren't expecting Orlando Arcia to come out and be the best hitter on the team the first couple of days. Things are going to balance out. I don't think Christian Yelich is going to stay hitting 045 for the year. I could be wrong, but I don't believe he's going to do that. I think that you look at, boy, it's so hard to say because normally you're like, hey, let's, wait till Memorial Day. Okay, wait till Memorial Day. Well, you don't have a Memorial Day. Let's say, is it 3 weeks into the season? Is it August 15th? Is that about right? How's that sound? I'm going to bet by August 15th, Orlando Arcia is not hitting 357. I'm going to bet that Kane, he might be hovering around 300, but he's not going to be hitting 333. I can't say don't worry and make sure you're patient because there isn't a lot of time for patience. There really isn't a lot of time for patience. Guys got to start to figure this out. If Suter has another outing like he did in Game 2 against Pittsburgh, you all of a sudden have to start really thinking about Suter's ability, Suter's confidence, and how to use him going forward. I'm not saying pull him, don't use him, because you're going to have to rely on him. If this team is going to make the expanded playoffs, which when I did last week's podcast with Paul Wagner, they were flirting with expanding the playoffs. They didn't expand the playoffs, and then on opening day, they expanded the playoffs. Now more teams are going to make the playoffs. And that's good for, I guess, everybody. I think what it really panders to are if teams that are supposed to be in the postseason, like the Yankees and Dodgers, sputter, this still puts them in the postseason, and then eventually you would think the best teams will get into the second and third rounds of Major League Baseball's playoffs. I think that's their intention, is to make sure they have the best chance to get major markets into the postseason. They don't care about the Brewers. They don't care about the Rays. They don't care about small market teams, but they care about making sure that they can get both White Sox teams, both Chicago teams into the playoffs if they can, both New York teams if they can, California. That to me is the reason to do it. And you know what? Fine, whatever. It also gives the Brewers an opportunity to slip up a little more and still make it to the postseason. I feel like having the expanded playoffs gives a slow starting team, like maybe you can say the Brewers are. As I record this, they're 2-3. It gives a slow starting team a better opportunity to get there. Guys that came out of the gate cold, like Christian Yelich, it gives them an opportunity to get better. Or even if they are still not having MVP years, they can get hotter. If they're not having that MVP year out of the gate, they can get hot, and it benefits them long term. It seemed a little bit weird to me that they were all of a sudden at the last minute they decided, hey, let's decide to expand the playoffs. But whatever. I think it gets more eyes on baseball, and especially at that point, who knows where we're going to be with the NFL season, and we're going to be deep into the NBA postseason as well. So they're doing what they can to figure out a way to get more butts in seats, if it will be. Pitching-wise, Woodruff looked great. Hauser, thumbs up. There are guys that have had good starts and bad starts, and just you kind of got to play this thing out for a few weeks because it's weird for us, but it's obviously very, very weird for them, too, to be playing in front of nobody with piped-in crowd noise and all that. And then the other thing about Major League Baseball, I don't know if we're going to see an end to this Major League Baseball season this year. Because you know what's happening with Miami Marlins. 15 players, as I record this, and a couple of staff members tested positive for COVID-19. The Marlins aren't playing games for the rest of the week. The Phillies have suspended some games. It's scary. Now, nobody else, there aren't any other players on any other teams that have reported positive tests for COVID-19. But we're going to see the Phillies, after playing their opening series with the Marlins, the Phillies don't have any positive tests, which is a good thing. And they were supposed to play the Yankees, and those games got halted, suspended, postponed, whatever you want to say. And the Yankees don't have any positive tests. Good for the Yankees. These are all, I guess, good things. But it just goes to show if you don't take this thing seriously, then your whole locker room can get infected. Now, there are 60-man rosters and taxi squads. The Brewers are even getting their taxi squad warmed up. I saw Corey Ray's name was making some headlines about a guy who could be seen coming out of Appleton. But there's a reason why you have 60-man rosters. There's a reason why the taxi squads are available. It's because of an outbreak like this. I don't think a single locker room of 15 players is enough to shut the league down. But I feel like had this spread to the Philadelphia locker room and had Philly played and then maybe spread it to the Yankee locker room, then you really would be seeing Rob Manfred step in and say, we're going to have to slow this thing down. Let's pause, regroup. Maybe this was a bad idea. I feel like Major League Baseball knew they were going to have this as a possibility, and they built in the 60-man rosters to say, we just will have to play through this. Just like in the NBA bubble, listen, you get it, you quarantine, and hopefully you're better, and everybody else stays away from you and nobody else catches it. You know, in the bubble in the NBA, they just tested 344 players and came back with 0 tests. None. Squadoosh. 0 positive tests reported out of the bubble. Bubbles work. The NHL, we'll see. They've got 2 bubbles in 2 cities in Canada. We'll see how well the virus is contained or kept out of those 2 bubbles. I want to talk about the NFL on another podcast because the NFL is watching this, and a bubbleless team or a bubbleless league like Major League Baseball has an outbreak in a locker room. Can you imagine if half the Packers caught COVID-19? Pick 40 of them. That's the equivalent of half of a Marlins locker room clubhouse catching COVID-19. And according to USA Today's Bob Nightingale, they caught it because they went out for a night on the town. Several of them did in Atlanta during the night of their exhibition game. Talk about not taking this seriously. Talking about having no respect for the rest of your team, your organization, and Major League Baseball, or having no respect for the virus. I mean, that to me it's insane. It really is. It shows a complete lack of maturity, and I worry that there are going to be some teams out there in the bubble in the NBA that are, like I talked about with Kane. I mean, if you're the Wizards or you're the Suns and you have no business playing for a championship, what's to say that you don't go out to like Lou Williams and go to a strip club and try to get some, dinner or whatever or other if you go elsewhere. So we're all sitting and waiting. Good the NBA didn't have any positive tests. I don't think the NHL has a bunch, if any, coming out of their 2 bubbles, and the NFL sits. But Major League Baseball has a big problem on their hand if any other teams are deciding to go out into the world where especially a hotbed like Atlanta and bring it back in. And then, by the way, the Marlins knew about the positive tests on Sunday and still decided to play. Don Mattingly said, we're going to play. The same Don Mattingly who's been seen in the dugout with his face mask that covers his mouth but not his nose. That's not the point of wearing the mask, all right? Your nose is a very, very big component. Covering that's an entry point or an exit point, potentially, for something that could help spread the virus. So right now, the Brewers are 2-3. We're going to talk more about, I got an NFL bubble plan I'm trying to work out in my head, but it takes a lot of time to explain, and I'm going to get to that later on in this week. My thanks to Kane Pitman. Definitely going to have him on. We'll talk about the Bucs games, especially when we get into the playoffs after the first 8. We'll definitely do that. So thank you for listening. Hopefully the Brewers can turn it around. We will continue to monitor this COVID-19 situation as it affects the Brewers and the Bucs, and eventually maybe the Green Bay Packers. And we haven't even touched on the fact that the Badgers are only going to play Big Ten games as of right now. That's going to play into my my NFL bubble, by the way. I'll get to that on another podcast. Thanks again to Kane Pitman. Thanks to you for listening. We'll do it again coming up next week, if not before that. I'm Mike Wickett. This has been Wickett on Wisconsin. As always, go Pack Go, go Bucks, and go Brewers. Thanks for listening to Wickett on Wisconsin. If you have any feedback or you want to reach out to the show, you can find me on Facebook, Mike Wickett Podcasts, or you can email MikeWickettPodcasts@gmail.com. And you can find me on Instagram and Twitter @MikeWickett. Thanks to Silverman Sound Studios for providing the music for today's show. And you can find us anywhere you find your podcasts, including Apple, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Until next week, thanks for listening to Wickett on Wisconsin.